All right, so I just wanted to show you something fairly interesting. So what I went ahead and did is I went and accessed GitHub from inside an ICM session using the custom external API key setup. So I just used the core stack production ICM, but it doesn't really matter because none of the folders or files in there matter. I went, hydrated the thing, told the agent to go. I told it we need to create an issue within the ecosystem Git repo. So this is just a repo that I created a long time ago for a game ecosystem. So this is just a conversion from the card game to a website. So that repo can be reached by the ICM using the Edubaware external API proxy URL, which is an environment variable that we set inside the ICM container. So we can go ahead and read that environment variable to know how to talk to the proxy. The proxy contains the external custom API endpoint, which is named GitHub. Now this is named by the organizational admin, and I'll show you why this is GitHub, and it doesn't have to be GitHub, it can be anything. But if you have multiple API keys, then they need to necessarily not collide. So this is just a way to get drilled down into the particular API key. And then what I wanted it to do was to create an issue. I didn't really care what issue. So the first time it ran into an invalid API key. Now this is unrelated to GitHub. This is related to ICM Cloud Provider, which is a organizational provider, and that one doesn't have a proper Anthropic API key. So that's what that was. The agent then got confused about the invalid API key, so it saw this and it assumed that it meant this API key. So we probably need to adjust the system prompt so that the user doesn't have to tell it how exactly to communicate with an external API. However, the ICM should contain these details in some way, or the agent itself should not really be making these requests. There should be some code that reads this environment variable, creates the request to go to GitHub. Whole bunch of considerations to be made, but that was the easiest way to get a secure API key, was to create this proxy. So it is what it is. I told it, no, sorry, that API key is actually not the GitHub one. That was the Anthropic one, so you're good to go. The repo, I was a little bit more specific. It's under my username. Try a simple get before trying to create the issue. It went ahead, it tried it, it got it, it succeeded. It ran into one issue, and that is that it needs an ICM session token, which is correct. You do need to make an API request to the proxy with a session token. That's to protect the API key so that you can only access it when an ICM session is active. So nobody can just ping that proxy and access your API unless they have the ICM session token, which they shouldn't have unless you run an insecure ICM folder structure. The next thing is it found the Edubaware session token environment variable, which is exactly what's created to be able to authenticate with the proxy. So then it was able to call it. Yes, it is a C# repository. Yes, it has 0 open issues. It was able to create an issue. This is where I stopped reading and just started recording a video. So this is all new to me. So let's go see if that issue is actually created. Okay, so here's the ecosystem. If we go to issues, there you go. And look, it was able to throw in the conversation that we had. It didn't throw in any of the other shenanigans that was necessarily after the fact. So this is good. Seems like it could be useful. And then let's see. Yeah, it added like some checklists, blah blah blah, something or other. So anyways, let me go into the configuration of how this was set up. So under manage organizations, what the end user needed to do to get, like, yes, there's a lot of nuance in the way that they have to communicate with in the ICM workspace. But the other side is they need to come to external API keys under ICMs, and then they need to create this thing, right? This is where you can put in GitHub, or you can put in anything you want. This is where you put in your GitHub API key, which is my personal access token for this ecosystem repository. And then you'd put in HTTPS, and it would be ideal if this was not so much manual things, but in the future we will add connectors and it won't be so verbose. Then you need to go to GitHub and figure these out, the way that the authentication works. So let me see if I still have that up. So this guy, you can see here, the authorization bearer your token. So what that's mapping to is you need an authorization header, right? That's what this is. And these are already put in because this is like the default. It gives you a few other options, which may also be proxies or authentication headers that other websites or other APIs use. And then the bearer is, again, just another part of this authentication method. And then a space, and the rest gets applied, right? This API key is going to get injected here to make the API request. So then you add that, right? That's GitHub 1. You can see the random API key. You can see here's the actual API key. So it's all cut out. This isn't the whole thing. This is just a shortened version. So you can sort of cross-reference if you have it stored somewhere else. And then that's the whole thing. So once you create this, then what will happen is there will be environment variables set inside the container that it can use, and it can reach out to either GitHub or GitHub 1. And if it reaches out to GitHub 1, it will use this token, right? And this token's just gobbledygook. It's not a valid token. But if it uses the GitHub URL, then it will work. So if we go back to that chat, just to refresh. So it was able to make a simple GET request. What it first ran into is that it needs the session token, right? So there's two APIs going on. So there's the API that goes from the ICM session to our proxy, and then there's the request that goes out of our proxy to GitHub. So the request from the ICM container does not go to GitHub. It goes to our proxy. And the whole reason for this is so that those API keys are never available to the model. The model will never see your API key. It will only see the Eduba session token. And the Edubaware session token is limited to an ICM session, specifically an ICM turn. So if the agent is sitting here waiting, then that token cannot be accessed. And just proves the external API usage. So now any ICM could reach out to any API, and they would not need to include their secrets in their ICM. They could just configure them and use the proxy.